D. Mitchell's story has been featured on prominent news outlets such as NBC and Yahoo, but if you need a refresher, he's the Oklahoma State basketball player who would take off his jersey after practice and trade it in for a blue vest to work at Walmart. The Oklahoma State baseball team has been dreaming about this day for almost a year, the day the team gets to christen their new stadium. Hear the roar of the crowd right behind me, and just maybe fire up the Gap Band. Ding dong, Oklahoma State's chance in making the college football playoff is dead. The number 6 Cowboys lost on Halloween to Texas in a game marred by unnecessary turnovers and questionable penalties. This season, Boone dominated in the post against all opposition. As you can see, his strength matched with his elusiveness and post moves was too much for the Sooners. What a transition for Boone, who came into Stillwater weighing only 170 pounds soaking wet. It's midterms week in Stillwater, and Oklahoma State basketball player Cade Cunningham's grades are looking a little different than most. Now, while students like myself get our grades from math, science, and English classes, Cunningham's most important grades are going to come from his shooting, defense, and efficiency. If the Cowboys win, they will likely be facing the number 1 team in the country, the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Yikes. D. Mitchell's story has been featured on prominent news outlets such as NBC and Yahoo, but if you need a refresher, he's the Oklahoma State basketball player who would take off his jersey after practice and trade it in for a blue vest to work at Walmart. Before head coach Mike Boynton granted Mitchell a scholarship, he was working several days a week at Walmart. His days would start early, around 6 a.m., and he would go from morning workouts and then practice, and then focus on school before heading for a 10-hour shift at work. The money helped his family after his mother Cassandra's hours as a traveling nurse were reduced due to the pandemic. But in the 2 months since Mitchell was awarded his scholarship, he's been able to breathe a little. And as Mitchell says, he has a lot more time to focus on basketball.
Just playing with my teammates and being around coach, learning as much as I can, through the basketball system, being around all these guys. I learned so much. I just miss that more than me.
After talking with his family and Coach Boynton, Mitchell decided to continue working at Walmart, but only part-time. He usually works on Thursdays and Sundays unless it interferes with basketball. Mitchell admits he still gets up around 6 a.m. as he's a morning person, but instead of having to work in the evenings, he's able to spend the time with his teammates. Freshman Rondell Walker says the team is lucky to have Mitchell around more.
We appreciate him. Good to see in the locker room. He's always he brightens our day, pushes us to get better day in and day out, and he's a good scout every time we're on the floor. So
having free time in the evenings means Mitchell has been able to sleep more, and he's even had time to take a few naps during the day.
I'm getting a lot more sleep, probably more than I need, honestly.
But after juggling school, work, and basketball for so long, Mitchell deserves all the rest he can get. Joseph Fazio, News OSU. On January 27, 2001, 10 members of the Oklahoma State men's basketball team died in a plane crash in Colorado. 20 years later, the lives of all the victims remains in the minds of those close to OSU, including Chad Weiberg. Weiberg is currently the Deputy Athletic Director and worked for the Alumni Association when he found out his brother Jared was one of the 10 who died in the crash. Jared was a student manager on the Cowboy basketball team and had always been close with his older brother. With the 20th anniversary of Jared's death, Weiberg says he thinks about the good times he had with his brother.
The edges of it kind of dull. It's not quite as sharp, and I think just as the years have gone on, you reflect more on all of the fun times, the good memories, and less on the accident.
Now, while 20 years have passed, it is still a deep-rooted event in OSU's history. That's why head coach Mike Boynton has made it a priority to teach his players about the crash every year on the anniversary. Some members of the team were very young or weren't even born yet when the crash happened. But for junior Isaac Likely, that doesn't make the history any less important.
My freshman year, whenever I knew about it, but I didn't just really know the backstory of everything that happened. So whenever I stood in front of him my freshman year, I got this kind of feeling.
Teaching the history of the crash will always be important because of 3 words scattered around the memorial. We will remember. Weiberg says it was a promise made by OSU to maintain the memory of those who died in the crash. And for Kendall, Bjorn, Nate, Will, Daniel, Brian, Denver, Pat, Bill, and Jared, OSU will always remember. Joseph Fazio, News OSU. This year's Bedlam Battle is brewing to be one of the rivalry's most anticipated games of the last 5 years. The winner after Saturday's game will likely be one of the two teams in the Big 12 championship. Now, while Oklahoma State has the edge in rankings and overall records, analytics give the lead to their in-state rivals. According to ESPN's Pick Center and Football Power Index, the Sooners are favored by a touchdown and have a 74.1% chance of winning the game. Now, those are just analytics, but statistics do a lot of talking. OU leads in points per game and total yards per game by a wide margin. But in all honesty, this game will be decided by the defense. If the Cowboys want to win, they need to shut down Spencer Rattler. The freshman quarterback struggled at the beginning of the season, but has found his footing in the latter half. Rattler has passed for 2,018 yards, which is the most by a freshman quarterback and 12th in the FBS this season. Defensive end Trace Ford says putting pressure on Rattler is the main focus on Saturday. The Cowboys managed to scrape by 2 weeks ago in Manhattan with a less than healthy team. Players like Tylan Wallace and Colby Harvell-Peel had time to rest during the bye week, but head coach Mike Gundy gave no indication if they will play against OU. In last year's Bedlam, the Cowboys were without Wallace and quarterback Spencer Sanders, who both suffered season-ending injuries weeks before. Harvell-Peel also injured himself on the final play of the game, which made him miss the Cowboys' bowl game. It can only be assumed that the trio are looking forward to Saturday no matter who plays. However, we can guess that the team would like everyone to play given how important this game is. Now, as I said before, the winner will likely be one of the two teams in the Big 12 championship. The Big 12 standings looks like it's in the midst of chaos as the season inches closer to the end. The top two teams hasn't changed since last week, but there's a fierce battle for third place. OU, Texas, and Kansas State all hold a 4-2 record. If the Sooners and Cyclones win on Saturday, the Cowboys will drop from second place to fifth. They'll kiss goodbye any chance at a Big 12 championship or a New Year's Six Bowl and start looking forward to playing in the Cheez-It Bowl. That's how important these last few games are. But as I talk about Big 12 championships and bowl games, I remember that sports may take a big hit soon. Not many people notice, but a little more than 2 weeks ago, I tested positive for COVID-19. And to be honest, I was scared. I sat in a 10-by-10 bedroom wondering if my health would suddenly take a turn for the worse. I'm very lucky to say that my symptoms were minimal, but I had a lot to think on the state of sports as a fan and journalist. I wrote this script while in quarantine and kept asking myself, how can sports continue when COVID is at an all-time high? The games listed on the screen are only 5 of the 11 FBS games that have been either postponed or canceled this week. And it's not just college football being affected, it's also happening right in our backyard. Last week, OSU Athletics announced the Cowgirl basketball team halted all activities after 3 players tested positive for COVID-19. And it doesn't stop with college athletics either. According to Cameron Jordan of the Oklahoman, Oklahoma City and Edmond Public Schools are shutting down winter sports indefinitely. If this trend of cases in Oklahoma continues to rise, I wouldn't be surprised if sports may be shut down statewide. Like many people, I was excited when the NBA, NHL, and other sports came back. It was at a time where we thought we had the virus under control. But while COVID cases are at an all-time high in the country, I'm not getting my hopes up for winter sports. Sports needs to be an afterthought right now, because if we don't change how we act as a society in this pandemic, come winter, losing sports will be the least of our worries.